Madam President, as I understand it, in this post-cloture time, how much time do I have?
Each senator may speak up to 1 hour.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I came to the floor to speak in support of Senator Feingold's amendment, and I came purposely to talk about that issue, but I am compelled, having heard some of the remarks made by some of our colleagues, to first preface my remarks as it relates to this debate. You know, yes, we're happy to have a debate, but it doesn't take 30 hours to come to the same conclusion that the American people have clearly come to in this country, that continual engagement in the war in Iraq and the course that we're on is not in the national interests of the United States. And they have come as, through their common sense that Americans always show, and this is overwhelmingly the conclusion of a great majority of Americans. They understand it. It doesn't take us 30 hours to do that. Now, we can have an open, honest, and intelligent debate with a few members on each side making the case for their respective point of views, but we don't have to take 30 hours in order to get to that goal so that we can move to the other important business of the Senate. This is important business, and it deserves a thorough debate, but by the same token, it's clear that the whole process of objecting to the majority leader's effort to limit the scope of time so that we can have a robust debate but then go on to the other business before the Senate and the country is to extend the time, is to delay, as we have seen through a record number of filibusters that the Republican minority has used in this chamber in a way that defies all historic proportions. It is clear that what was intended to be used as a rare occasion to protect the rights of the minority, particularly on exceptional critical issues of the time, has now been abused in such a way in which it is intended to stall the work of the Senate, but more importantly, the work of the American people. So that's the framework in which we start this debate. We can have a robust debate, but we don't need 30 hours to accomplish that. Secondly, I really cannot understand how some members can come to the floor of the Senate and rail against the fact that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Bill has not been passed by the House of Representatives when they refuse to agree to a 21-day extension of the existing law that gives the administration everything they want to do. So if this is such a critical issue, as has been described by members of the Republican side of the aisle, why would you not have agreed to continue, while the Congress debated, the opportunity to extend the law that allows you to do all those things that you say are critical to the protection of the American people? I can only come to the conclusion either it's not as critical as they define, because fear is what we sell, it seems, on the Republican side, and we've been hearing fear for quite some time, and the American people have caught up to that. Or, in fact, they simply wanted to have the proposition for a political purpose. If not, we would have had the 21-day extension. Everything the administration claims they needed, they would have had, and therefore we would have been able to move forward. So I think those two items need to be put in the context. Now, let me get to the main purpose of what I came to the floor to speak about, and that is in support of Senator Feingold's amendment. The Senate has an opportunity, once again, to vote to transition our troops out of Iraq with honor and refocus our efforts on defeating Al-Qaeda. And it is long past time for us to make that decision. Now, the administration has never told us the truth about the war in Iraq. Some people want to gloss over that, but if what is past is prologue, then we need to be worried about what we constantly hear. The budget that they submitted to Congress is just the latest proof of that. The budget's terrible in a lot of ways. It leaves millions of children without full access to health care. It fails to wean us off of our addiction to foreign oil. It fails to adequately address climate change. It fails to repair our education system or shrink the ballooning deficit. Basically, it fails to make a serious effort to tackle the most pressing problems that average Americans face in their lives each and every day. But beyond that, the budget is dishonest about the costs of one of the most expensive wars in this country's history. A war that has lasted more from American engagement in World War II. A war that has lasted more than America's engagement in World War II. It lists the cost of the war in Iraq for next year at $70 billion. All the other calculations in the budget, including the debt and the deficit, in some way assume that $70 billion is all the war is going to cost in the next fiscal year. Now, we have to wonder if whoever wrote the section of the budget on Iraq found their job after leaving their old post at the accounting department of Enron, because it's clearly the same type of accounting. You know, recently the Secretary of Defense took a baby step towards honesty and estimated the true cost for next year at another $170 billion of America's money. And he said that was just a rough estimate. Because when you've already spent more than $500 billion, I guess you just round up to the nearest $100 billion. Now, this is with an administration that has over 5 years of a historical engagement in Iraq, knows how many troops we have, knows the projection moving forward, therefore knows what the consequences in terms of costs are, and to come and send a budget to the Congress that everyone knows in the context of the cost in Iraq is a farce. This type of carelessness, if one can call it carelessness, in accounting is offensive to the American people who are funding the war. This administration is so dead set on staying in Iraq. I know some presidential candidates have suggested that we will do so for 100 years if necessary. They just don't seem to care how much tax money they spend. They don't seem to care how much money they have to borrow from the Chinese to pay the bills, because we don't pay for this in terms of how we're going to afford the war. We don't domestically decide, well, this is going to be offset by some other either revenue stream or cuts in programs. No, we, under this administration, just keep adding up to the next generation. More debt. More debt. They don't seem to care how much wind gets knocked out of our economy, because the money could have gone to creating jobs, stimulating the production of green energy, or helping families make ends meet. As a matter of fact, we could use that money to do something that's critically important as well: protect America here in domestic soil. Because as we look at the president's budget, what does it do? It eliminates cops funding, that put 100,000 police officers on the streets of the city. It cuts Homeland Security grants to states by 70%. It cuts port security by half. It cuts infrastructure security by half. And this at a time in which every report, including those of the administration, has Al-Qaeda reconstituted in the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, and the reports coming out that they have been reconstituted with the strength and the ability to perform another attack on the United States.